Good morning. The Subcommittee on Federal Impacts on Minnesotans and Economic Stability will come to order. We do not yet have a quorum, so we will save our official action to adopt the nonpartisan summary from the October 15th hearing until more folks arrive. But we will get started with our hearing today. 3 years ago, Minnesota's colleges and universities were in crisis. Across the state, and with 2 decades of trends in the wrong direction, enrollment was down, tuition was up, and there were serious questions about how long departments or institutions could continue to operate. For the first time in a generation, the state took bold steps to put our colleges and universities back on the right track. We made historic investments in higher education with funding that went directly towards affordability for students and households, like the North Star Promise tuition-free program. The results have been immediate and dramatic. Enrollment soared, campuses revived, and the regional economic impact of hundreds of communities that our colleges and universities feed into have stabilized and even thrived. As this committee has learned on so many topics these past few months, none of this is possible without a federal government that does its part. Since his inauguration, Donald Trump has explicitly targeted American colleges, students, faculty, and scientists. He has sued dozens of colleges and defunded entire areas of research for ideological, political reasons, and slashed or attempted to end billions of dollars in research grants and tuition support. Last week, some of us met with students, faculty, and leaders in northern Minnesota. Thank you to UMD for hosting us. To hear how these federal actions and threats are already affecting universities, students, and researchers. These stories were upsetting. Projects ending, layoffs coming, student loan debt ballooning. We heard scientific researchers tell us that they cannot imagine a career for the students who would succeed them in future generations. Those changes would undermine every step we've taken at the state level to restore our colleges and universities. These schools are our best hope to keep young Minnesotans here and attract the next generation of transplants. People like me, who came to Minnesota to go to college, find friends, start a job, start a family, and never leave. These institutions generate billions of dollars to our state economy. Their cultural and social impact in our communities and neighborhoods cannot be measured. Members, in your packets, you'll find materials that are helpful to understand the issues that we'll hear about today. We have a busy agenda, and I ask that members hold their questions until the end of a testifier's presentation. And President Pribenow, please join us first at the testimony table. Welcome to the committee, President. If you would just introduce yourself for the record, and then please present your testimony when you're ready.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I am Paul Pribenow, the president of Augsburg University in Minneapolis, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to share testimony about the recent federal administration policies and actions that have had an impact on our students, faculty, staff, and campus community. Like several of my higher education colleagues who will follow me, we have experienced the discontinuation of specific programs that served our students. 2 significant grants were terminated at Augsburg. The first termination was our LSAMP, or Lewis-Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation Grant, which is a program initiated by the National Science Foundation aimed at increasing the number of STEM, that is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics degrees awarded to underrepresented populations, including African Americans, Hispanic Latino American, American Indian, Alaska Native, Native Hawaiian, and Native Pacific Islander students. The program supports partnerships between higher education institutions and other organizations to enhance student success and promote diversity in STEM fields. We were part of a coalition of Minnesota institutions that participated in this program, and the grant amount was $125,000, which provided student scholarship funds. The more significant termination was our TRIO McNair Scholars Program, a federally funded initiative aimed at preparing undergraduate students for doctoral studies through research and scholarly activities. The program is designed to support first-generation college students and those from traditionally underrepresented groups, helping them gain the necessary skills and resources to succeed in graduate education. Participants in the program engage in research, receive mentorship, and are encouraged to pursue advanced degrees, ultimately increasing the number of students from those backgrounds in doctoral programs. Augsburg has had a McNair grant program for almost 125 years, for 25 years, and had recently been renewed for another 5 years. The grant, totaling $785,000, supported 3 staff positions, all of which were eliminated, scholarships for 15 to 18 students a year, along with support services for students applying to graduate and/or professional schools. We were one of 18 McNair programs out of 220 across the country that were terminated. And the reason given was that our renewal proposal, written during the Biden administration, referred to anti-racism training that Augsburg offered for faculty and staff. After January 20th of this year, we had eliminated that requirement from the program, and we highlighted that fact in our appeal of the decision. The denial of our appeal came back swiftly within a couple of days, and included the same reason given in the original termination letter without reference to our changed requirement. We were clearly pulled out by way of a keyword search that identified words the Trump administration has banned from federal grant applications. As difficult as these funding losses have been for our students, faculty, and staff, and our experience certainly pales in comparison to other larger research institutions, they nonetheless have added to an atmosphere of fear and anxiety for our community, and that is the larger point I want to emphasize. As you may know, Augsburg is one of the most diverse private colleges in the country. Our student body is more than 70% students of color, 68% of our students are Pell eligible, 60% of our students are first generation, and we also have other student populations who have been the target of the current administration. Whatever their identities, all of our students from these communities now live in fear that their opportunity to get a college degree could go away at any moment due to the constantly changing policy environment. The recent so-called compact that the Trump administration has suggested for colleges and universities is aimed at undercutting the core values of higher education in our democracy: academic freedom, institutional autonomy, and our commitment to educating students for economic mobility and civic engagement. To agree to this compact and thereby receive favorable standing with the current administration is anathema to almost all higher education institutions in our country. The broader challenge is that the primary forms of federal support for colleges and universities in our country are Title IV financial aid, the Pell Grant, the Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant, college work study, and federal loans. Anything that we do or don't do that threatens these Title IV funds is an existential challenge for almost all higher education institutions in our country. So far, the administration has not pulled the lever of threatening this support, and those funds, those Title IV funds, have generally bipartisan support in the Congress. But I think you can understand why I, as a president of a university, walk a fine line in protecting the institutional autonomy of my institution while also ensuring that we do not lose this critical support for our students, my students, who represent the future engines of our economy and our democracy. I thank you again for this opportunity to offer my testimony and for your thoughtful openness to understand the challenges our colleges and universities face in this current environment. Thank you.
Thank you, President Pribanow. Members, questions? Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, a comment to President Pribanow to say thank you to Augsburg and your leadership for the huge heart that institution has for serving our community, the neighborhoods that I work in and have worked in since I was a very, very young community leader. Augsburg is one of those private institutions. We're familiar, of course, with the University of Minnesota and its three-legged stool of, education, research, and community engagement and service. And, of course, many private institutions have the same, but Augsburg that third leg is huge at Augsburg, and you do much to move the ball forward in helping otherwise underserved communities thrive and neighborhoods gain tools they need to pursue success. So I guess my question is, what now? How do you replace some of those efforts with the resources that have been withdrawn by our government and our public sector?
Madam Chair, thank you, Senator. Certainly, we make every effort to respond to loss of support for students in particular. As I mentioned, we did lose the 3 staff positions, but the students that were in that program, then we've picked up support for them through alternative mentorship programs that we had available. That's not sustainable, but in the short term, to be able to support the students that termination happened while that program was already underway in this academic year, so in some ways they were already involved in the kind of work that was going to prepare them to go to graduate school. So the challenge for us is to continue to be strong advocates for these programs, which again serve our most vulnerable students, primarily income-based programs. So they're not about race or ethnicity. They really are about income levels. But at the same time, for us to be seeking support from some of our philanthropic donors and others that have helped to fill that gap that we find in funding. And we're finding actually many individual donors as well as foundations that in the short term are stepping up. Very clear that is not a long-term solution, but stepping up in the short term to help us meet that need. So.
Senator Dibble? Thank you. Other questions, members? Senator Mayquade.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much, President Pribenow, for being here. You said the compact, and then you used the word anathema. Can you just talk a little bit about what the Trump administration's compact would have asked you to do or what it's asking you to do? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
President Pribenow?
Yeah, Senator, Madam Chair, Senator. Yes, the compact had a variety of different components to it. Basically it was attempting to at least get institutions to agree to certain aspects of their curriculum that would actually not be allowed. So, demanding diversity viewpoint, which we all do anyway. Again, it was providing a kind of a level of oversight, if you will, that folks would sign up for that. And of course, the leverage for them was that if you do that, then you're going to have priority support for some of the other grant programs that have. There also were concerns, as rightly so, around anti-Semitism on certain campuses. That has not been an issue on most of our campuses. We have, in fact, found ways to support our students from the variety of different perspectives they bring to the bear. So there were just things that were really around taking away the autonomy of institutions to be able to determine how best to teach their students. And I think it was this notion that somehow there was a narrative that we were institutions that were indoctrinating students or whatever the particular language they use, when in fact, as I like to point out, Augsburg for 156 years has met the students who come to our campus, has given them a great education, and then sent them out in the world to help our economy, support their families, give back to their communities. And so in many ways, the compact was attempting to provide some oversight and control over those kind of functions that we've had for 15 decades. So.
Senator Mayquade?
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciate you kind of going into that. I think, it's pretty clear that the Trump administration wants to control what people learn about and what they think and how they act. And I think I'm, also really struck by the idea that anti-racism training was the reason that you've lost these Trio McNair grants. And maybe if you had made training to be racist, maybe you would have gotten them back. But it is really startling what we're seeing and the way that the government is acting towards academic freedom and thought and learning and truth and history and it just comes through in all of these ways, and it's really impacting students and our great universities here in Minnesota. So I appreciate you sharing your experience.
Thank you. Senator Marty.
Thank you, Madam Chair and President Pribenow. First of all, I want to second what Senator Dibble said about the incredible work that Augsburg's been doing. And I wanted to say I appreciate how you spoke out against the intimidation, against the fear. It's basically we see a dictatorial kind of control. We want to tell you what to think, what to teach, how to do it, who to teach. And I think the higher education institutions standing up to it firmly are about the only thing we can do right now, and hope we don't lose too much because, as you said, that's core to who you are. So thank you for that, and I appreciate your highlighting the intimidation and fear, not just among the students, but anybody who cares about teaching.
President Pribanow.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, Senator Marty. Yeah, for us, part of this is really around the narrative that is, in some ways, there is an attempt to build a narrative about higher education that somehow we're places that have actually undercut our democratic principles, that in some ways we are places that are educating students only for a particular political position. And I just think that the truth is our job is to provide an alternative narrative to that, which, we're not perfect. None of us claim to be perfect. We have challenges that we need to face, affordability, all the kinds of questions that you've raised here. We're all aware of those kinds of things. But that false narrative that's being, is in fact raising doubts for people about impact or the role of higher education in our democracy, which has really been the case for 250 years. And you can look at so many different aspects. And I think about, I mentioned our very diverse population on our campus. I look at those students and they are the future leaders of our businesses, of our civic organizations. They're going to be sitting in these seats at some point in the future. It's easier we're on the right side of history, I'm sorry, because that's the demographic change that's happening in our world. And those are the students that we have the privilege to educate. And it's really been a real gift to me personally to be the president for now 20 years of an institution that has the commitments that you and Senator Dibble have mentioned, and that really clearly are built into the DNA of the place. And we're proud to be part of a higher education kind of ecology here in Minnesota too that shares those commitments. My partners and colleagues that are here, along with the others who are not here, I think we all agree that higher education is central to the needs of this state, and that's what we're really committed to.
Senator Dibble, and then we'll move on.
Thank you. So I just wanted to make another observation, Madam Chair. As long as I know that the focus of this hearing is on the tangible and practical effects of withdrawing research and its effects on our economy and our ability to prosper and thrive as a state. It's a giant subject. But we're also talking about our democratic traditions and civil society. And that has everything to do, of course, with people's ability to thrive and prosper and exercise their freedoms that are guaranteed as citizens of this country. And as we look at the steps that, for example, Viktor Orban and others have taken, Erdogan in Turkey, to take the democratic system and move it towards a more autocratic, authoritarian system. They took deliberate steps to exercise control and power over the major institutions that support and serve the people, starting with the judiciary, of course, and the legislative branch to bend them to their service, and open up the newspaper any day now in our country. And we're seeing deliberate steps on the part of this administration to do these exact things. Electoral systems, the independent regulatory bodies, nonprofits, and philanthropic organizations, the military, law enforcement, arts and culture, and education, higher education. We heard discussion of these compacts that the Trump administration, the president was demanding through use of blackmail and threats and bullying and intimidating that all of our higher education institutions enter into, whether public or private, so that he can use our national education system to promote his ideas, encourage what he views national unity to be, discourage any thought outside of what is ordained and approved by him and our government. This is actually what we're discussing today, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Dibble. Thank you very much, President Pribanow. We appreciate you joining us.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Thank you.
We will move on to St. Catherine's University, Catherine Campbell and Nestaho Abdi. Please join us up at the testifiers table. Once you're settled, if you would introduce yourselves for the record and then present your testimony when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Katie Campbell, and I am an associate professor at St. Catherine University and the Assistant Vice President for Sponsored Programs, Research, and External Engagement. Until recently, I was also the principal investigator on a research education program funded through the National Institute of Aging. I'm grateful for the opportunity to testify today regarding the impact of recent federal grant terminations on St. Catherine University, a 120-year-old institution dedicated to educating women to lead and influence in their communities. Notably, St. Kate's is a minority-serving institution with a unique student demographic among our peers. 52% of our College for Women students identify as BIPOC. 43% of our undergraduates are first-generation college students, and 44% are Pell eligible. Sweeping and capricious federal funding cuts have resulted in significant and immediate harm to our students, faculty, and staff. As of today, 5 federal grants totaling over $2.4 million have been stripped from St. Kate's as part of the current administration's agenda to dismantle diversity, equity, and inclusion. Unlike our peers at public universities who were able to reinstate their same awards as a result of the lawsuits brought forward, the private institutions have not had the same federal funding reinstated. As a small institution, this is a substantial loss, and one that is felt in real time by students and faculty relying on competitively earned dollars from both the NSF and the NIH to support their academic and professional advancement. Our success in securing these federal awards is because the programs we developed supported long-term but quickly eroding government goals to advance scientific discovery and improve human health for the benefit of all people, regardless of background. One specific example of the impact of this federal funding loss on our students is the termination of the CARE grant, a $1.98 million 5-year grant funded through the National Institute of Aging R25 mechanism titled Advancing Diversity in Aging Research. We designed the CARE program to prepare under-resourced students to become the next generation of researchers in longevity and aging. Through this highly successful program of curricular and mentored research experiences, our students engaged in geroscience research to improve health span and lifespan by targeting root causes of aging. Moreover, we coined the term gerojustice to highlight how unequally experienced social and physical factors accelerate aging in our communities. To our dismay, on May 27th, as our current cohort of 18 research students were literally in transition to their summer research projects at Mayo Clinic, the University of Minnesota, and at St. Kate's, we were notified that our grant had been summarily terminated. The immediate impact was that we had to let our full-time grant coordinator go, and we spent the next month scrambling to find funding for our students, young women who had arranged their lives to do this important work. Longer term, without the contracted grant funding for the next 4 years, we are unable to recruit a new cohort of eager scholars this fall. Most disturbingly, our current students and those who graduated over the last few years are now facing incredible challenges landing. So much of the federal funding research infrastructure is being targeted by the current administration. These actions are clearly detrimental to our future health and vitality. In closing, I want to ask for your advocacy and support of our students at St. Catherine University. Among the Minnesota private colleges, we serve students from households below the median income level of our peers and are proud to rank number 1 in economic mobility for our students. In short, we provide rich educational opportunities for students who are often left out of higher education. If this committee considers any state-funded solutions to the federal grant impacts, we ask that you consider treating federal grants lost at nonprofit institutions in the same way as you would those at public institutions. Thank you for your time and your commitment to our students and their future economic stability. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Ms. Abdi, if you would just introduce yourself for the record and then present your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Nisteo Abdi, and I'm a third-year student in public health, concentrations in public policy and community health at St. Catherine University. I'm here today to share with you the impact the CARE program, a formerly NIH-funded R25 program, has had on my peers and me. I first learned about the CARE program during my first semester of sophomore year, a time in my life when I was questioning my academic journey and career path due to changes in public health. I am a refugee and a first-generation student, and educational success and a career I am passionate about are my life's work at this moment. However, finding services and programs that work to uplift students like me can be challenging. The CARE program has been a godsend for me at a time when I needed a chance, someone or something to show me why I love the fields that I love: research, public health, and policy. The CARE program at Cmte has done more for me than I could ever explain to you. It has made me realize my potential as a student, scholar, and a person. It has shown me that success in the research field is within my reach. It has instilled in me the belief that as a young Black woman in this day and age, where inequities are still present, I am capable of making substantive change. It has shown me that I can and I will make a positive impact on my community and society as a whole. Contrary to popular belief, the CARE grant and others like it do not work to give chances to undeserving individuals. It is the vessel of social service and justice as it serves to dismantle barriers specific to certain communities. When we cut grants, when we tell Black and brown students, first-gen students, and our female students that their research, quotes, and this is language from the grant termination notice, does nothing to expand our knowledge of living systems, provide low returns on investments, and ultimately do not enhance health, lengthen life, or reduce illness, end quote. We limit the impact our students and research can make. We know that research drives innovation, raises essential questions, and allows us to make necessary changes to medicine, technology, and psychology. We cannot let this go on. We cannot jeopardize our students' opportunities and our potential as a society, as a people, in an attempt to dismantle diversity, equity, and inclusion. The actions that the federal government has taken have caused significant harm to our students, faculty, and the broader society as we limit research opportunities that could benefit our communities. I am currently in the application process to be a Truman Scholar, a highly competitive and prestigious scholarship for undergraduate juniors who hope to enroll in graduate school for public policy. This aligns perfectly with my aspirations and goals of making a meaningful impact in public health and policy. From my perspective as a student, the recent federal changes to how student loans are made available are especially significant, and not just financially, but for enrollment and retention. Because the rules now cap the amount students can borrow, especially in graduate school and professional programs, some of my peers might decide not to enroll at all in any programs or choose different institutions that cost less. For those who do enroll, the changes may affect our ability to stay in programs. If students borrow less, they might struggle to cover living costs, or they might drop out or transfer if they realize the debt burden is higher than expected or aid is less available. In short, access to education is still tied to loans, but the new federal policy environment means that the decision to start college, the choice of programs, and the ability to stay through to completion are increasingly shaped by how these loan changes affect each student's risk and resource calculus. In the years to come, I will be in the positions that you are in now. I will be a senator, I will be a policymaker. My peers will be scientists, doctors, engineers, epidemiologists. There will be people who will make positive and impactful changes to the world that we live in now. We have unwavering hope in our state and our country. But to be those people, to be policymakers, doctors, and change makers, we need people to first believe in us, in our research, and in our ideas. We need the CARE program and others like it that work to uplift us and educate us. Sitting here today, if there's one thing I hope you carry with you, it's this. There was a time when you needed a chance. There was a time when I needed a chance, and you and I got those chances. I ask of you to do what you can to ensure that all students, no matter who they are or where they come from, are given that chance. I ask that you do your part in protecting grants like the CARE program. Thank you for your time, thank you for your energy, and your presence today. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Senator Mann.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you both very much for being here today. Is it Dr. Campbell?
It is.
Thank you, Dr. Campbell. When these grants are suspended or terminated, what does that look like? Do you get time to put together a contingency plan? Do you get time to tell your students what's happening, to fundraise? What does it look like when a program is terminated?
Dr. Campbell?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. Thank you, Madam Chair. In our circumstance with the CARE grant, it was effective immediately upon notice of termination. So there was no time to do contingency planning. We were in reactive fund seeking mode to support our students through their summer research.
Senator Mann?
Thank you, Dr. Campbell, Madam Chair. So I think, it's pretty clear that we are seeing kind of the systematic destruction of higher education purposefully. with goals certainly in destroying certain demographics. And we know that because what we got from the White House was a printout of research that needed to be terminated, and it was pretty much any research that included certain words. So some of those words are bias, equality, multicultural, trauma, and the one that's my favorite, they wanted to terminate all research that had the word women in it. And it seems that the least they could do, right, if this was being done in good faith to save money or whatever else they're saying, was to give you time to set up for success, even if the money was being terminated. But that's not what's being done, right? They are, again, purposely destroying educational opportunities. And so with the most chaos possible. And so I just wanted to say thank you for being here today, for everyone who's here today, using your voice to say these things out loud. Because at this time in our history, we've never seen something like this before, and we need more of that. We need more people standing up, using their voices and saying what is happening out loud. So thank you.
Senator Makewaid.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Mann. I have a few questions, but the first one is, Ms. Abdi, would you be willing to read back that direct quote from the termination letter?
Yes, I can. It stated that our research does nothing to expand our knowledge of living systems, provide low returns on investment, and ultimately do not enhance health, lengthen life, or reduce illness, end quote.
Senator Makewaid.
Thank you, Madam.
Sorry, I was
speechless.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, no returns on investment. I mean, I am the first woman in my entire family for its entire existence to be able to start my own credit card or get a loan at 18. Like, that's how long women have been able to do that. I'm 39, I'm a millennial, elder millennial, but I'm 39. I'm the first woman born in my family who was able to take a credit card or take out a loan at 18. And St. Kate's, I'm a Tommy, but I love St. Kate's, right? Has been educating women for longer than it was acceptable to, certainly, probably cusping on when it was legal to. Millennials are dying at a very alarming rate right now in our society, from cancers, colon cancer in particular. There's a lot of deaths for a lot of reasons, but it's alarming researchers. And I can't think of a better return on investment, personally, than figuring out why and solving it. Dr. I'm looking at this long list here, I'm sorry, Dr. Campbell, you talked about the Jared Justice, focusing on our seniors, which is our largest population. We are fully in the senior tsunami, and every single day, this legislature grapples with our changing demographics. But one of the things we grapple with is how to keep people who are aging healthier for longer, needing less acute care, in their homes, thriving with their families, so on and so forth. And I really wish that Senator Nelson was here today, because I heard you mention that there were researchers going to Mayo that had their grants cut, and she represents part of Mayo, and I would love to hear what that looks like in community. But I'm just really taken aback by the overtness of basically saying women don't matter, that educating women, solving problems that affect women or people of color or LGBTQ people don't matter. I mean, it's so overt. Or that people who don't make a lot of money or don't come from wealth shouldn't be able to go to graduate school. What else are we supposed to take from this? And the work that you do is so, so important. And I just want you to know it's so incredibly valued here at the legislature. And part of the reason we do this is to make sure that we can know all of the things that we're going into that previously this legislature didn't have to know about or worry about or think about, right? And so this fact-finding mission is alarming, but I'm so grateful to you both for sharing your testimony today. And Ms. Abdi, when you were speaking, I was like, oh, she'd be a really good state senator. So I'm very glad you have that plan already in place, but it's just shocking, and I know we'll keep hearing more shocking things, but it's worth mentioning.
Thank you, Senator McQuaid. I know we have a busy agenda and we should move along, but I'm literally sweating from you reading that statement. It's so appalling. to not just cut research under clearly demographic, political, ideological lines, as Senator Mann pointed out, but to do it with the cruelty that is connected to receiving a letter like that, that says you have no value, your work has no value, I don't understand where it comes from. I don't understand how that is someone's view of the world. The work that you all do, that Minnesota universities and colleges, that researchers and scientists and our students across this state do, has incredible value to our state. Not just return on investment, not just monetary value, it keeps your grandparents alive longer with a better quality of life. It protects, we were up in Duluth, it protects our environment. It protects our forests and our lakes. And I really am sorry that you received that letter, because that is absolutely the antithesis of how we in Minnesota value higher education. You matter, your research matters. It is valuable to us and our state in many ways, and we will save a spot for you at this table because you will be an incredible legislator someday. Thank you both very much. Senator Dibble.
I apologize. I don't mean to step on your final word for these testimonies, and I'll go quick because I know we have a lot more testimony, but some things just have to be said. Number one, thank you to both of you, particularly Ms. Abdi. Took a lot of courage, and I'm sorry for what you're going through, but I thank you for maintaining that flame of hope and for stepping forward for public service, both in your future, but also in your career as a public health professional. I was just listening to a Republican member of Congress on public radio who was saying Obamacare is bad, and we need to bend the cost curve down. Well, we do need to bend the cost curve down. I agree with that in the delivery of health care, and a major way we do that is by improving the public's health, and we need to support public health professionals. I'm glad the subject of Mayo Clinic came up, and I'm sorry that Senator Nelson is not here because I put together some notes in preparation for this hearing. Here's what you need to know about the Mayo Clinic. Headquartered in Rochester, is a top-tier research institution, a training site for health professionals, and a global destination for patients. Its operations in Minnesota generate an estimated almost $10 billion in economic impact, about 4% of our state's gross domestic product. It employs more than 33,000 people in Rochester alone. The Destination Medical Center initiative is leveraging $5.6 billion in public-private investment to attract additional private development, create tens of thousands of jobs, and generate billions in new tax revenue. Why would we support efforts to undermine this vital institution to our state? The stupidity and the bigotry is mind-boggling, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Dibble. Senator Marty.
Madam Chair, just one quick word I have to cut out, and I thank you again for your testimony. Powerful. I want to second what you said about the cruelty here. I think that the impact of these cuts is going to hurt our quality of life, it can hurt our life expectancy, it's going to hurt every part of things. But it doesn't seem to be that this is some person's attempt to make society better. It seems an attempt at cruelty to punish certain people, even if it hurts everybody else. They want to punish people for whatever reason, and the cruelty is what bothers me most about it, though the rest of it has bad impact as well. So I'm sorry I have to cut out, but thank you.
Thank you, Senator Marty. Thank you both very much for your testimony. We really appreciate you joining us. We will move now to St. Scholastica, and our next testifier is on Zoom. Dr. Kaja Savoya, who we met up in Duluth last week. If you can unmute and introduce yourself and begin your testimony when you're ready.
Madam Chair, for the opportunity to testify on the federal decisions that are impacting our students and community, and for the committee's interest in these impacts. I am Dr. Kaisa Savoya, an associate professor and program director of the Masters of Occupational Therapy program at the College of St. Scholastica in Duluth. I am also the co-project director for a $3.9 million 5-year U.S. Department of Education Mental Health Service Provider grant that was recently non-continued in its 3rd year of funding. The non-continuation cuts short the project by 2 years and cuts about $1.95 million in anticipated funds for the project. Reasons for the non-continuation were given as the grant provides funding for programs that reflect the prior administration's priorities and policy preferences and conflicts with those of the current administration, in that the program violates the letter of purpose of federal civil rights law, conflicts with the department's policy for prioritizing merit, fairness, and excellence in education, and undermines the well-being of the students these programs were intended to help. This particular grant was developed through bipartisan support in Congress through the Safer Communities Act to train school-based mental health providers, which can include occupational therapists, ensuring that the nation's children receive the mental health care they need and reducing barriers that deter treatment. This is a critical grant for the local area. It provides direct training for occupational therapy students to increase the number of providers trained to support children with mental health needs, which is critical for workforce shortages in especially rural areas like northern Minnesota, where our college is located. It is also a grant that provided direct services to schools in our area, which have seen notable cuts in funding, which limits their ability to support children daily. As of this month, we have trained 41 master's OT students, work with 1,300 K through 12 students annually, and have provided training to over 200 plus school district staff across our sites and additional national trainings for occupational therapy practitioners. The grant also funded the development of the Pediatric Mental Health Fellowship Program, which is an approved American Occupational Therapy Association fellowship, which is only one of 6 in the country to provide advanced pipeline training for licensed professionals. The college has also experienced uncertainty around other grants, namely TRIO and HRSA grants, and student aid that supports students across the college. While the other grants have ultimately been continued, the impact of uncertainty around grant initiatives impacts students and the community. Many of these grants, like the OT program's Mental Health Service Provider Grant, support students through stipends which offset the cost of education and provides opportunities for us to expand representation of our whole community within the workforce. Uncertainty impacts expansion of services to areas of Minnesota that critically need resources, especially within healthcare. Most importantly, it limits innovation and the development of creative solutions to address the needs of local communities, which is especially important now in healthcare. Without outside funding for novel projects, these projects may never occur or their scope may be small, which hinders the advancement of these new areas and workforce development in Minnesota. Thank you again for your time and for your work at the state level. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Members, questions? Senator Dibble.
Thank you so much for your testimony, and thank you for stepping forward and being with us today. Something caused my ears to perk up, and that was you mentioned an aspect of the grant supporting work in pediatric mental health as a recognized OT delivery. Can you talk a little bit more about that, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator. Occupational therapy was at its inception grounded within mental health. This originated back in World War I when occupational therapists were working with veterans and people coming out of World War I. Over time, we have used that throughout our practice models as we work with clients. Our intent in providing mental health supports is to be able to work with individuals to be able to get them back to their occupations. That can be anything from being in the school classroom, like this particular grant was supporting, being successful in home activities, in daily activities, And a really key critical component is not just the physical ability, but also the mental ability to be able to do so. And so we are really poised and positioned well to be able to support those services, especially in the school-based setting. This is not to undermine or to remove additional mental health practitioners, but really to be able to expand and to be able to be innovative, to be able to support where there are shortages, and to be able to use your providers at the top of their licensure.
Senator Dibble?
So, Madam Chair, I would just invite on a nonpartisan basis for everyone in this institution to listen to what was just shared with us. And I'd also invite the public to not pay so much attention to what we see in the headlines and the rhetoric we see in newspaper articles about how important it is to support the delivery of mental health care and mental health services in all places, particularly for young people. But pay attention to what people do, who they support, what they prioritize with their votes and their allocation of resources and their leadership. The rhetoric in the newspaper about how important mental health care is meaningless unless it's backed up by action. The action being taken is to deny young people mental health care and mental health services by the leader of the other party. I invite people to speak up and stand against that so that we actually have a fair shot at getting those kind of mental health supports to the young people as we struggle with these issues of gun violence and school shootings. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Other questions, members?
Thank you, Ms. Suvayoya. We really appreciate your testimony and appreciate you meeting with us last week at the roundtable as well and sharing more of your story.
Thank you very much for your time.
We will move now to St. Thomas. Shelley Nielsen-Gatti, please welcome to the committee. Once you get yourself settled, if you could just introduce yourself for the record and then present your testimony.
Well, hello. Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Dr. Shelley Nielsen-Gatti. I am a professor at the University of St. Thomas in the School of Education and the chair of our Department of Special Education. I, like you, moved to Minnesota in 1996 to further my education and have never left. I've been teaching or working in education since 1989 and started as a special education teacher. Over this past decade, my department and colleagues in my department have been working actively to pursue different grants, both state, federal, and philanthropic grants, to address the financial barrier of becoming a teacher. Most recently, we were successful in receiving 2 of the largest federal grants to support teacher preparation in the state, and I was the co-director of 2 of these federal grants. It's been wonderful to hear my colleagues across the state talk about the federal impact and your also dialogue around the impact to our state here. And I want to share one example of how these cuts are affecting students at St. Thomas and in our K-12 or pre-12 school communities across the state. But before I do so, I want to remind all of us about the importance of teachers and teachers matter. My dean likes to say, my major makes your major possible. It's true. Every job, every profession begins with a teacher, and effective teachers strengthen our schools, our workforce, and the civic life of every community in Minnesota. Yet we continue to have a serious teacher shortage in our state. I want to highlight a few of the outcomes of the 2023 Minnesota Teacher Supply and Demand Report. This is probably not new to you, but just to ground us in this, and I'm assuming the next PELSB Supply and Demand Report will be coming out any day. It's typically in November of every other year. So the demand for teachers is evenly distributed across economic development regions within the state, across every economic development region. Charter schools are more likely than public schools to fill other public schools to fill a position with a teacher holding a Tier 1 or 2-tier license. Majority of districts report either being somewhat significantly or very significantly impacted by the teacher shortage. And the licensure areas filled with the highest proportion of teachers holding a Tier 1 license or a Tier 2 license or an out-of-field permission is special education, and this has remained consistent. I share these because this was our impetus in going after federal funding. Our university and our School of Education has been innovative for decades in developing teacher pathways and overcoming barriers to becoming a teacher. We know the number one barrier to becoming a teacher is finances, and so we've designed programs and we've gone after federal funds as well as state and philanthropic funds to overcome that barrier. In the Department of Special Education, we have received 4 federal grants, 2 Office of Special Education Program grants, or OSEP grants. These funded licensure areas in autism and early childhood special education. We currently have an early childhood special education and social work interdisciplinary OSEP grant. And we had 2 Department of Education, or under the Effective Education Development EED Office federal grants. These grants are not easy to get. We applied 3 times, and the 3rd time was the charm in our Teacher Quality Partnership Grant. In 2020, we submitted a Teacher Partnership Grant, a TQP grant, and received $2.8 million across 5 years to replicate our established teacher residency pathway partnership that we currently have with Minneapolis and St. Paul Public Schools. And we wanted to replicate this residency pathway for charter schools. One, because I just mentioned about the Tier 1 and Tier 2 teachers in charter schools, and because our charter schools were reaching out to us and asking us to develop this with them. The teacher residency model is based on the medical model of residency, that concept of being a resident, and pairs a rigorous full-year classroom apprentice-like experience with education content. The teacher residents are paid employees of district partners and learn to teach alongside an effective and supported mentor teacher. One of the biggest costs in teacher residency programs is the stipend or the pay to the teacher resident. So we sought this federal funding through the TQP grant to provide a living wage stipend to those teacher residents in our charter schools. As I mentioned, this was a 5-year grant, and we had this grant for 4 years and 5 months. During this time, we recruited and prepared 78 teachers for the charter schools in Minnesota to receive a Tier 3 teaching license. 85% of these teachers are still teaching. On the morning of February 13th, we received an email with an updated grant award notification, or commonly known as a GAN, that stated we didn't get as much as St. Kate's did about why our grant was canceled. All it said is that the grant is deemed inconsistent with and no longer effectuates department priorities. This did not include any other information or correspondence from the Department of Education. As I mentioned before, the biggest expense funded through our TQP project was the living wage. This was our 4th cohort in our grant, and we had 21 current students that were receiving a living wage stipend and working in schools to earn their teaching license. This left 21 of our students across 11 charter schools with less than 4 months to go of their program without pay, effective immediately. They had a choice. They could either leave their position, forego their dream of becoming a teacher to earn money so they could pay their bills, or they could continue their 4 months in their program without pay. I'm happy to say that all 21 did finish the program and are currently teaching in Minnesota schools. We were able to scramble like mad to find a whole bunch of funding, as well as with our school partners to fund them in other positions so that they can complete their program. In addition, in 2023, we submitted a Supporting Effective Educator Development, or SEED, grant and received $6.8 million to provide scholarships for over 300 educators in Minnesota. This was a 3-year grant that supported 3 unique pathways to becoming teachers at St. Thomas. The first was that teacher residency program, which I mentioned before. In addition to our charter residency, we have had a 10-year history of teacher residencies with St. Paul Public Schools and Minneapolis schools, and we have prepared nearly 500 teachers through that pathway. Also, SEED provided scholarship support for our graduate work and learn licensure program. These individuals in this path can stay employed as paraprofessionals or tier 2 teachers to receive their license. At the time of termination of our SEED grant, 62% of the candidates were working in districts other than Minneapolis and St. Paul. And their final pathway was a focus on undergraduate pathways and especially supporting a pathway from our Doherty Family College 2-year program at St. Thomas to come to our 4-year program to get a teaching license. On Friday, February 7th at 7:00 p.m., we received an email from Mark Washington, the Deputy Assistant Secretary, informing us that the department's decision to terminate our federal award because the grant was inconsistent and no longer effectuates department priorities. That's all we heard. At the time of the termination, we had 186 students who were receiving seed scholarships across the state of Minnesota, representing a specific number of 80 communities across Minnesota. We were able to only award $700,000 of $2 million of scholarships for year 2 of our grant. In summary, these terminations left us lack of $4 million in scholarships to Minnesota teachers, impacting at this year 185, and we could have doubled that had we continued to receive this grant. $400,000 in living wage stipends to our charter school residents, research and evaluation dollars to examine the effectiveness of these models and how to improve them. And then the ripple effect on individuals' decisions to become teachers is immeasurable. We don't even know what the ripple effect is on people who chose not to become teachers because of this. We have filed appeals of the SEED and the TQP grant termination last winter. We were hopeful that these appeals might bring some relief to our students who were impacted by these grant terminations. Unfortunately, our appeals of the TQP grant termination have been denied, and our appeal of the SEED grant termination is still pending. There is also a lawsuit filed against the Department of Education by various trade groups that are seeking an order to reinstate these grants. This litigation is still pending. In my 20 years at St. Thomas, I get a chance to work with teacher educators weekly. I see how life-changing this is for our students and for their students and families. For many candidates, becoming a teacher provides upward mobility and greater financial stability for them and their families. These cuts have real human consequences and immeasurable ripple effects on school communities. I appreciate you taking the time to bring attention to these really important issues, and I'm happy to take questions at this time.
Senator McQuaid.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for being here. Go Tommies. I'm so proud to be a Tommy. You know, and I remember when we had an education committee hearing earlier this year, and you brought students in who were literally in the middle of their programs, and they were talking, I mean, they were, had families, and they really were passionate about becoming special ed teachers. You talked about the teacher shortage, but is there a, overcrowding in the special education field for teachers? Ms. Gotti?
Are you asking me that? Well, according to the Minnesota Supply and Demand, right now, are you talking about higher education institutes providing licensure? Right now, according to the Minnesota Supply and Demand, no, it continues to be a significant need, and districts continue to report significant shortages in that area, of special education.
Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I know that. I sit on the education committees, and I had a bill to help put, more paras through special education, preparation programs. But, I think it's really important that people understand that part of DEI is special education. That's what inclusion is including people with disabilities into society. And so this war on people of color and disabled people and LGBTQ people and women, this is what that looks like. And I guess I'm just trying to suss out, this impacts students, it impacts universities, but what does this end up looking like for a student in a special ed program in a district like mine?
Professor Gotti.
Well, thank you for asking that question, and I appreciate your work on this on behalf of education and special education. It looks a lot of different ways. Sometimes if if the position is not filled by a licensed teacher, a couple things can happen. One is that the other special education teachers in the building will divide up the students that they're receiving services, and so then they're providing services for more students, and their job becomes even more demanding. Another thing that can happen is the district can hire people who are not fully licensed. They might be a paraprofessional who has a graduate degree that steps into a Tier 1 teaching position. It might be a family member that's familiar with education and wants to come in and be a teacher. It might be somebody who's been fired because of other layoffs in our community and are looking for teaching positions are looking for a position but have never had any sort of experience. And then what we're doing is we're putting our students who have the most significant learning needs with people with the least amount of preparation to become a teacher.
Senator Makewaid.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think it's just really important to know this, and Professor Gaddy, if I get any of this wrong, you tell me. But part of inclusion and making sure that we have students in the least restrictive environment possible is that they are treated like their peers with the adaptations needed so that they can learn along with their peers. So if a first grade teacher has curriculum about reading or science, the special ed teacher has to take that curriculum, it's the same curriculum, and then adapt it with no guidance. They just have to know the student, know the curriculum, and then with their teaching and training, adapt it so that that student can get whatever they need to learn at that same curriculum. That is an incredible amount of work and specialty, and it requires so much knowledge. And you mentioned family members. I love non-traditional pathways into teaching. I think it's great. But if you asked me to go into my daughter's class today and be like, hey, adapt this curriculum I wouldn't be able to do that, and most people wouldn't. Most teachers who haven't done special ed training wouldn't be able to do that. And so it is just so important to name that the people that we leave behind by this gutting are students with disabilities who are incredible and have incredible abilities and have bright, bright futures when they have the right support. And we are just creating second-class citizens over and over and over again. Some are worthy of this and some are not. And that's the opposite of what this entire country is supposed to be about. It's the opposite of what public education is supposed to be about. And so I thank you so much for the work that you do and all of the teachers that you're putting into our schools. But we have to do this work. I mean, we haven't had to think about this before. This is the federal government's job. And so, again, finding this out, it just adds to this long list of things that the state needs to figure out how to support, but we have to because these are our students and they have a legal right to an appropriate education in the least restrictive setting possible. And when we don't have that, those teachers who are trained to do that, then they get put in more restrictive environments and then they aren't learning. And that's not what we want for anybody.
Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As the proud uncle of a niece who got her graduate degree at St. Thomas and went on to be and is a brilliant kindergarten teacher at Bancroft. Thank you for everything you do. And that's not hyperbolic. I have objective data that tells me that she's brilliant and very loved and very, very highly regarded. But when she went through student teaching, she wasn't paid. And it was really, really difficult because she was herself raising a daughter. And so she just ended up living with her mother to help with living expenses. And she sacrificed a lot to become a teacher. And I think it is mind-boggling that it is just not normal to pay young people that we have to put in for grants and things like that. I am overjoyed to hear that cohort of 21 made it through. I don't know how they did it, but that's a miracle. And given the shortage, both in special education and just teaching in general. Madam Chair, we hear a lot, we're very familiar with the attacks on research and higher education, but Donald Trump is also attacking primary and secondary education. Mm-hmm. He has said he loves the poorly educated. He said that. And it's not a surprise because, of course, it's in his interest to hinder critical thinking, to control information, exploit ignorance, and do all kinds of things that authoritarians do. And so I think we need to pay attention to this part of the conversation around education as well. Again, the stupidity and the idiocy and how self-defeating it is to us as a country and a nation to not make sure we have people who are prepared to move into jobs and to leadership and to support our democracy by having those critical thinking skills and overall skills to support families and share and create prosperity is just mind-boggling. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Dibble. And Professor, I will just say thank you so much for your work. We at the legislature often, every single biennium, grapple with the cost of special education and the value that we know that it has in our communities. And it's often because the federal government hasn't been paying its fair share over many, many, many years. This is a new, different kind of attack on the teachers that would do that really thankless work in many ways, and often invisible to the community as a whole, but so critical to all of our students being able to build, as Senator May-Quade, the bright, bright futures that they have ahead of them. So thank you so much, and if you would please take our thanks back to your program and let them know that we appreciate them.
Thank you very much. Again, I appreciate you bringing attention to this.
We will now shift to the University of Minnesota. Jun-Young Cho. Welcome to the committee. If you would please just introduce yourself for the record and then present your testimony when you're ready.
Madam Chair, members of committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. My name is Jun-Young Cho, and I serve as the Assistant Vice President for Research and Innovation at the University of Minnesota. The university is closely monitoring federal legal developments and agency actions, including temporary restraining orders and preliminary injunctions to protect our research portfolio and ensure continuity for our faculty, students, and staff. As of Monday, November 10th, the university has had 101 federally funded research awards terminated or suspended across several federal agencies. These include the National Institute of Health, U.S. Agency for International Development, U.S. Department of Agriculture, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, U.S. Geological Survey, Department of Energy, and the Environmental Protection Agency. The reasons cited for these actions include executive orders and changes to policy related to agency priorities. The unexpended balance associated with these awards total over $33 million in research funds that can no longer be spent, except for limited closeout cost. The impact spanned 20 colleges and research centers across the university. About 25% of the affected funds are in the School of Public Health, 21% in the College of Education and Human Development, 17% in the College of Science and Engineering, and 13% at the University of Minnesota Duluth. 16 additional colleges and research units are also impacted. Awards have been terminated on 4 campuses: Twin Cities, Duluth, Crookston, and Morris, showing that effects are system-wide. In addition, we have seen delays in more than 110 NIH proposal applications that remain pending without formal action. We have not yet tracked similar impacts at other agencies, but monitoring continues. The university remains focused on supporting affected researchers, maintaining compliance, and working with our federal partners and the state of Minnesota to protect the long-term stability and impact of our research programs. Thank you for your attention. I'll be pleased to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you very much. Members, questions? Senator May-Quade.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You said there were 101 awards terminated. Can you just talk about if there was one that you would say, like, this one was shocking, or, this research was interrupted and it would have, we were moving towards this. Could you just maybe put some color into those 101 awards?
Madam Chair, Senator, unfortunately, we haven't prepared that specific example to share with you today. That's something we'll get back to you and committee later time.
Any follow-up, Senator May-Quade? Senator Mann.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Cho, for being here today. We talk a lot in every committee about money and economy, but I just want to really put a point on the human cost of this. 101 programs terminated at the cost of $33 million across the university in research that has been canceled. We cannot train the next generation of scientists without appropriate funding. And what also occurs when we halt research programs is that the work that they're currently working on is lost. Cells can't take a break and stop multiplying when you ask them to. Drugs don't stop working when you ask them to to pause. That doesn't happen. So not only did this administration put people's education in peril and completely disregard people's employment, they also threw away current research, wasted ongoing research. Scientists and grad students in these programs, should funding become available again, have to start all over again from square one. And so what the federal administration did was they took away people's time, specifically the little time that some people may have on this earth, waiting for their research trial to start, only to be told that it has been canceled and it no longer exists. And for some people, those trials were the only options they had left. And so, again, the amount of cruelty coming at the base of all this is really quite astounding. And it goes back to just a kind of authoritarian 101. When you keep people uneducated, it is easier to control them. When you keep people poor, it is easier to control them because they are concerned about surviving and not fighting back. And so, again, thank you for being here today and highlighting what's happening at the university.
Senator Dibble?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to expand on the excellent testimony, thank you so much for being with us today. I again did a little note-taking before I got here. The University of Minnesota launched 25 startup companies in fiscal year 2024. Since 2006, since the founding of their Ventures Center, they've launched about 260 with a long-term, and those are with a long-term success rate of almost 70%. And the vast majority of those have located in Minnesota. Madam Chair, that's just applied research. And basic research, of course, we know is at the foundation of innovation. It's that long-term kind of research that occurs that hasn't yet tied directly back to a potential payoff, the exact role of public sector research. The university trains about 70% of Minnesota's health professionals, graduates tens of thousands of students each year in engineering, agriculture, business, IT, education, and the liberal arts. The majority of them stay in Minnesota, which reinforces our high-skilled labor force and leadership pool for all of our employees of any size. And if we want to talk about a brain drain and demographic shifts, it's not the super-duper wealthy elite that we keep hearing about who are leaving for Florida. It's the young people who start families, businesses, build communities, buy homes, and support our businesses. We talked about the research and commercialization. That generates $3.9 billion in economic impact and more than 25,000 jobs of any kind that you can think of. And then just think of what each campus has in terms of benefit for their local communities, whether that's Crookston, Duluth, Morris, Rochester, or the Twin Cities, construction, retail, hospitality, professional services, ranging from $90 million to $1 billion per campus. Madam Chair, why would we even waste one breath defending and supporting an administration that is doing active harm to the prosperity and success of Minnesota? I can't imagine. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Dibble. Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I actually found the article that I was thinking of, and I was hoping Mr. Cho could, but there is an article long about what these federal grant cuts did. So malaria vaccines, undergraduate research opportunities, talking about boosting immune responses to fight off infections, brain infections. One of my constituents is a pediatric oncologist researcher studying how to save kids with cancer. That's literally her job. And she and her husband, who both work at the U, came into my office. They were saying, what happens if this funding goes away in the middle of our pediatric cancer study? This is all those parents have. And she said, kids are incredibly resilient once they get the right treatment. And funding is stopping for the right treatment. We saw pediatric cancer grants cut all across the country. Why? Who hates kids? I mean, these are kids with cancer. They deserve every chance in the world to grow up and be joyful and make mistakes and, sing, dance, whatever they want to do. And this administration was like, F those kids with cancer. It's heartbreaking. I think about it every day. My kid is healthy right now. What if she got cancer? So, to Senator Mann's point is what brought that up for me, is that for people for whom this was their last hope, this research was their last hope, or they have a genetic disease that could come later in life, but hey, hopefully the research will mean that maybe there's a cure or treatment by the time I get to be, to rip that out from underneath people is so destabilizing. And it's unfair and it's unnecessary. This didn't need to happen. We could have, not given billionaires a bunch of tax breaks and maybe funded kids' cancer research. It's infuriating. I read the article, so I'm more mad now. But I want to thank you, Mr. Cho, for the work that you all do at the University of Minnesota. I'm the daughter and wife of legacies, and so I would be remiss if I didn't say Ski-U-Mah, but the work that you do across all the campuses is vital. We have produced groundbreaking things here in the state of Minnesota. And yeah, it'll be a brain drain from the state of Minnesota and from this country, quite frankly. I mean, nobody wants to come to a country where they're not welcome, where we don't prioritize intelligence and research and making those breakthroughs. There was not too long ago, we were going for the cancer moonshot. Now we're cutting kids' cancer research. What a shift in such a short amount of time. I hate it. I want to thank you all for the work that you do and know that you have our utmost support here at the state of Minnesota. And even though we can't backfill the federal government, we will continue to be partners alongside you to fight for what you deserve and what Minnesotans need.
Thank you, Mr. Cho. I'm going to try to get through this without crying. I wasn't sure if I would talk about this, but I came to Minnesota to go to the U. I am a Golden Gopher. If Aaron gets to brag about being a Tommy, I get to brag about being a Golden Gopher. And the U has changed my life twice. The first time by helping me fall in love with Minnesota. I love it here. I don't ever want to leave. And I credit the university to a great part of that. After COVID, I got very ill and have long COVID. And there was very few people who you could see, who knew who would even try to help you through what was going on. And the university was one of those places. Physicians, researchers, we would meet on Zoom because we couldn't go in, we couldn't be in person, it wasn't safe. And through those first 2 years, after I was infected, the university was really my only resource. It was absolutely necessary for my quality of life, for me to be able to continue to do this job, which I love, and my community needed me in this place. The research and the collaboration that the university was doing post-COVID in this brand new space shows the infrastructure that exists around research. You can't start research from nothing. You have to have an institution that understands how to do research, that understands the different mechanisms of it, that understands how to collaborate with other researchers. And that work was incredibly important to my life and to many others across the state of Minnesota. And eventually, the physicians that I was working with at the U suggested that I start working with their colleagues that they were working with at the Mayo Clinic, because everyone was in this together. They wanted to help solve a problem for people. And I got into the Mayo and I got treatment and I'm doing better every day. And that is because of scientists and physicians and researchers and institutions that back them, that help provide the funding, help provide the space, help provide the opportunity for ideas to grow and become changes in our state and across the country. So I really want to thank you. I want to thank the physicians and the researchers and the students at the U who are doing incredible work. As Senator McQuaid said, we can't fill these holes, but we are committed to fighting with you. I will fight with you till our very last breath because it is incredibly important, the work that you are doing. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Dr. Cho. We will now turn to our second agenda item. We appreciate all the institutions that have come to share with us and focus on federally created barriers to student enrollment, retention, and the ultimate statewide economic impact that these changes will have. Joining us from the Office of Higher Education is Dr. Wendy Robinson. Dr. Robinson, if you would please introduce yourself for the committee and then present your testimony.
Thank you. Madam Chair and members of the committee, for the record, my name is Dr. Wendy Robinson, and I serve as the Assistant Commissioner for Programs, Policies, and Grants at the Office of Higher Education. Thank you for the opportunity to provide some updates on changes happening at the federal level and the potential impacts of those changes on Minnesota students, our graduates, and our colleges and universities. To first provide some context for this overview, I'll start by noting that college enrollment trends for Minnesota continue to be strong in fall 2025. While OHE does not yet have all of the final fall enrollment data, we know that the Minnesota State System, the University of Minnesota campuses, and the colleges represented by the Minnesota Private College Council all reported increased enrollment for this fall. According to the most recently available data, Minnesota residents continue to make up the majority of the over 400,000 college students the students served by Minnesota colleges and universities. Overall, 70.5% of all college students in the state are Minnesota residents. If we break that down by sector, we see that resident students make up approximately 98% of the students at tribal colleges, 91% of the Minnesota State college, two-year college student population, 80% of Minnesota State University students, 73% of University of Minnesota students, and 61% of students at private nonprofit colleges and universities. I think it's also helpful to note that the majority of students, just over 75%, who graduate with a bachelor's degree from a Minnesota institution will stay in Minnesota and enter our workforce after graduation. That number is even higher for our associate's degree graduates, with over 81% of those students employed in the state within a year after their graduation. While the overall enrollment picture for Minnesota looks strong this fall, the picture may look a little different for international students. Minnesota annually enrolls nearly 15,000 international undergraduate and graduate students. These students add over $488 million to the state's economy annually. And there are some early indicators that international student enrollment may have dipped slightly at some of our institutions and while increasing slightly at others. National data suggests that international student enrollment numbers were down overall compared to last year, and some early reporting indicates that enrollment was down more for new international students compared to continuing students, and might have been more down for graduate students versus undergraduate students. The final enrollment numbers for this population of students are also still pending, so we don't kind of have exact numbers yet. But we know that there are probably several reasons for these reported declines in student enrollment, including the significant slowdown in the processing of student visas in early summer 2025. According to a recent study from the National Council of Graduate Schools, over 75% of schools surveyed reported seeing longer visa processing times for their prospective students, while 50% reported seeing longer visa processing times for their current students. 75% of schools surveyed also reported that prospective students expressed concerns about their visa status and/or their deportation risks, while 85% of current students expressed those same concerns. They also surveyed prospective international students who opted not to accept their offer of admission and come to the U.S., and kind of asked them what their reasoning was for why they were turning down that opportunity. 19% reported having fears for their personal safety, 48% had concerns or challenges with the visa process, 36% had concerns about costs, and 25% had concerns about the level of political unrest in the U.S. Early indicators also suggest that international student enrollment increased in the UK and in Australia this year, suggesting that those countries may be benefiting from the visa challenges experienced here by students trying to come to the US. I'd like now to shift to provide some updates of some changes that are happening at the federal level that impact financial aid and the student loan sector specifically. And these are federal changes that may have an impact on Minnesota students, our graduates, and our institutions. First, a quick update about the current status of the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. Prior to the current federal administration, over 20,000 Minnesotans who've been serving for over 10 years in jobs like teaching, firefighting, childcare work, nursing, and other critical industries have had over $1.26 billion in student loans forgiven through this program. Last month, the Federal Department of Education announced new guidelines for the program that will take effect on July 1st, 2026. The new guidelines state that borrowers who work for government or nonprofit employers that have a, quote, substantial illegal purpose will no longer qualify for loan forgiveness. Examples of this substantial illegal purpose could include things that are perfectly legal under Minnesota law. That could include working for a nonprofit community organization that supports undocumented immigrants and their families, working for a medical system that provides gender-affirming care for transgender youth, or doing any work that broadly supports diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. Attorney General Ellison has joined a coalition of 22 other state attorneys to challenge the lawfulness of this change to the program, and so at this time we don't have an estimate for how many Minnesotans would be impacted, if any, under these guidelines. There are also other changes to financial aid and student loan programs that will also likely impact Minnesota students and families in the future. There were several financial aid changes in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, or OBBA, passed by Congress in July. And to acknowledge that there was one piece of good news within that legislation, which was that the bill included a $10.5 billion increase in funding to address pending shortfalls in the Pell Grant program, so we were happy to see that. Some other Pell Grant related changes include the elimination of Pell Grant eligibility for students who have an SAI or Student Aid Index above $14,790, which is 2 times the current Pell maximum award limit. It also saw the creation of a second Pell Grant program known as Workforce Pell, which will focus on short-term workforce programs. We do know that students will not be able to receive both a regular Pell Grant and a Workforce Pell simultaneously, and that Workforce Pell will count toward a student's overall Pell eligibility limit. However, additional guidelines for this new Pell program are still pending, so we're not currently able to estimate what the impact for Minnesotans will be of the implementation of this new program. There has been a cross-agency working group convened already and is already working to get ready to stand up these programs in the state once we do have that additional guidance on how that will work. In terms of student loans, there are several changes that will impact future borrowers. After July 1st, 2026, new borrowers will only have 2 payment plan options, a new standard repayment plan and a newly created income-based repayment assistance plan, otherwise known as RAP. The RAP program will replace current programs like the SAVE plan or other income contingent payment plans. The RAP program will also allow for repayment terms of up to 30 years before loan forgiveness would be an option, compared to 20 to 25 years for current programs. So that will, in fact, cost borrowers more and keep them in debt for longer compared to the current available options. The RAP program will not offer any income protection. So even borrowers who are below the poverty line or even earning $0 per year will be required to make monthly payments under this program. There is concern that this could increase the number of students who are driven into student loan default in the future because they simply just do not have income to be able to pay those loans back. After July 1st, 2027, there will no longer be deferment options for borrowers facing economic hardship, including unemployment or a medical crisis or anything along those lines. Also, some changes that while the current loan limits for federal undergraduate direct loans were not changed, there's a new lifetime borrowing limit on all federal student loans of $257,500 over the lifetime. While most borrowers will never get anywhere close to borrowing that much money, there could be an impact for students who need to borrow for both their undergraduate degree and then who go into a graduate or professional program that typically will have a higher cost than where they've generally had to borrow more. The current Grad Plus loan program, which did not have a maximum borrowing limit, will end on July 1st, 2026 for new borrowers, although there will be some legacy provisions for current borrowers. After that time, the direct loan program will establish new borrowing limits for new graduate student borrowers, again, beginning on that July 1st, 2026. Students who are in master's degree programs and some PhD programs will be limited to $20,500 annually and a $100,000 lifetime limit. Students in some, but not all, professional programs, which includes medical school, veterinary school, law school, dentistry, will be limited to $50,000 annually and $200,000 over the lifetime of their lifetime. And just for context, the cost for a Minnesota resident to earn a medical degree at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities campus is just over $314,000, which means that there will be a significant shortfall in their ability to borrow what they need from the federal loan program if they're not able to pay out of pocket or not receiving other forms of financial assistance. Given that the interest rates on private student loans are almost always higher and often significantly higher than federal limits, this will have a significant long-term financial impact for those borrowers, especially for lower income students who are seeking to enter medical, dental, or other professional fields. The Department of Education will also be capping borrowing for Parent Plus loans to $20,000 annually and $65,000 over the lifetime per student. Again, nationally, there are concerns that these changes will drive more undergraduate and graduate students into the private student loan marketplace. Thankfully, Minnesota residents will continue to have the option to borrow through our self-loan program, which currently allows for students to borrow up to $40,000 per year and up to $140,000 over their lifetime at interest rates that are much more favorable than private loan programs. OHE continues to watch for guidance on the implementation of all of these new programs and these shifts and changes, and will work with our campus partners to share information and resources as it becomes available. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm happy to answer questions if I can.
Thank you very much. Members, Senator Make-Wade.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I read a lot of those pieces like individually and hearing it all together. I'm like, well, who's going to afford, who's going to be a doctor now, right? Like wealthy people, which I think is the point, right? It's to keep people from going to school in the first place. So fewer people go to college or pursue higher education, and then keep people who pursue higher education, to be the children of wealthy people. Do you have estimates? So like, let's say all of that was the case today. Do you have estimates on like how many students that would impact, or are there so many financial pieces it's hard to put together?
Thank you so much for your question, Senator McQuaid. I don't currently have estimates with me. I know that broadly speaking, those loan limits are quite a bit above the median borrowing for most students. So a lot of students won't necessarily be impacted by that. But there will be students for when they do have an impact, it'll be a significant impact for them. And so I don't think we've modeled yet kind of what all of those put together will look like just yet, but that's something that we can take a look at.
Senator Make-Wade.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And then I don't know if it was deferment, is that what it was called, but like for medical illness, unemployment, so we're going in, we're in a recession right now. We're seeing massive layoffs. We're seeing terrible job numbers. In 2027, I think, is when you said it goes into effect. So like if we're still in a recession, then people will be expected to pay their student loans before food and rent?
Dr. Robinson?
Yes, thank you for the question. So essentially, there would just be no option for them to request the deferment that they would have available to them now. In my understanding, under the new plans that would be available, the minimum monthly payment might be pretty low if their income drops to zero or they're below the poverty line. But yes, there would still be an expectation that every month they would need to be sending in some form of payment to their loan or risk going into default, which obviously has a cascading effects on their ability to borrow things in the future and all the negative consequences that go involved in student loan deferment.
Senator McVeigh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also want to just put, this is a very, very small piece of it, but with the firing of federal workers that we've seen, which includes a lot of Minnesotans, so we would have federal workers who aren't able to pay their student loans back, and then if they go into default, one of the things that prevents you from being able to work in the government in certain places is having financial issues because it makes you easily exploited by other countries. So what we could be seeing is a generation of workers who, if we ever right this ship and actually start using our government to help people and do good things, wouldn't even be able to go back into public service because of the financial devastation brought on by their own government. And I just, this is sad. This is terrible.
Dr. Robinson, one of the things that you said in your comments, as you were talking about the changes to student visa allotment and screening, one of my favorite parts about attending the U is the diversity on campus and how it opened my eyes to a whole new world. And that included international students. And two numbers that you said just really stuck in my brain. 19% of the students that were screened fear for their safety, like that was a decision in not to come, is a threat to their safety, and 25% feared political unrest. And to me, that is so indicative of where we are. I want our students thinking about the incredible ways they can change the world. I want them to feel like a university or a college is an opportunity. And we are hearing loud and clear that it is becoming a place of stress where will you be able to take out a loan that's big enough? Will you be able to defer that loan if you get ill or lose your job? Will you be able to have your loan forgiven for the things that we have decided serve the public good? And are you afraid to come to our country? It's really a deeply sad moment for me to hear those numbers. And I know many of us have been raising the alarm for a long time about changes in our country over the last year, but it is very clear that it is spreading throughout the rest of the world as well. Senator Mann?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is crazy. Your testimony is unbelievable. So again, going back to you keep people uneducated, they're easier to control. So this federal administration is going to punish people for going to college. They're going to punish people for seeking graduate education. They are going to bankrupt people who go to school on purpose. It's about a quarter of veterinary students, over 50% of dentistry students, and over 40% of medical students who are going to need to borrow more than the new limit. So my colleague just leaned over after your testimony and said, so we're not gonna have doctors anymore? And that's exactly what this is doing. We already have a doctor shortage. We have a mental health professional shortage. So what was said earlier, right, when someone mentioned, people will say they're gonna fight for healthcare, they're gonna fight for mental health, but then they do this. They support legislation that systematically dumbs down the workforce and systematically decreases the amount of healthcare workers available to support the people. This is absolutely insane.
Senator Dibble.
Yes, Madam Chair, talk is cheap. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. Anyone who supports anything like this should not be in the newspaper talking about how much they support an education economy, a research-based economy, and public education and public goods. You talked about sweating. My heart is beating hard right now. You packed a lot in your testimony, and I kept picking myself up off the floor. But the fact that the president is creating fictional illegal activities in his mind, just targeting people whom he wants to discriminate against, targeting my community, the LGBTQ community, targeting brown people who are supported through community-based services and support organizations, folks who go into public service, whether that's government or community-based organizations, which we want them to do, and if they do so for 10 years or so, they can see their loans forgiven, are going to be forbidden from having those loans forgiven if they're undertaking any activity that don't meet the standards or the demands of the authoritarian. They don't qualify. Again, Madam Chair, we're really talking about increasingly shrinking freedoms and democratic space for us to live out our aspirations and our dreams under the control of someone who's deeming for us what we need to do with our lives, what we need to think, and what we need to believe.
Dr. Robinson, thank you so much for your very disturbing testimony. We really appreciate your willingness to come and speak with us. It is helpful for us to know the full scope. As Senator Mayquade said, we hear these in bits and pieces, and putting it all together is really critical for us to be able to be the best partners we can for you. So thank you so much for your work and for your testimony today.
Thank you so much for your time.
We will now shift our focus to Nate Peterson from the University of Minnesota and Paul Shepard from Min State, if you would both come up to the testifier table. And Mr. Peterson, if you can introduce yourself for the record and then present your testimony.
Madam Chair, members of the Subcommittee on the Federal Impact on Minnesotans and Economic Stability, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Nate Peterson, and I serve as the Executive Director of Student Finance at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. I'm here today to discuss the impacts of H.R. 1 on financial aid for students from the University of Minnesota system. The University of Minnesota stands ready to implement the required financial aid changes enacted through H.R. 1 as signed into law on July 4th, 2025. The University of Minnesota is currently awaiting further guidance from the U.S. Department of Education and the Federal Student Aid Office pending outcomes from the negotiated rulemaking that concluded the week of November 3rd, 2025. Until we see this guidance, we are unable to fully assess the impacts to financial aid for our students, as the guidance will include implementation rules and expectations for institutions of higher education. We are very cognizant of the July 1st, 2026 deadline for implementation for legally required changes. Even though this is a very tight turnaround for institutions of higher education to implement this level of change, we stand ready to lessen the impact on our students. To remain compliant with federal regulations and to implement technical updates, it will take additional manual work for higher education institutions. From a student perspective, the changes from H.R. 1 that we are closely watching include, but are not limited to, the proration of loans based on enrollment status, the changes to maximum loan limits for all borrower types, the elimination of Graduate Plus loans, and the changes to student loan repayment options. The University of Minnesota has run statistics using 2024-2025 academic year data to estimate the number of impacted students had these changes been enacted 1 year before. Here are selected statistics based on that data. Regarding the implementation of aggregate loan limits, 2.1% of our student loan borrowers, that's 283 unique students, would be impacted by the new lifetime aggregate federal loan limit maximum at $257,500. The majority of those impacted, 80.5%, 228 unique students, are in professional programs including dentistry, law, medicine, pharmacy, and veterinary medicine. Regarding the implementation of Parent Plus borrowing limits, 47% of our Parent Plus loan borrowers, that's 742 unique borrowers, would exceed the annual limit of $20,000. We anticipate greater levels of private borrowing for the student parent to fill this gap. Regarding the elimination of the Graduate Plus loans, 17% of our Graduate Professional student population, that's 2,534 unique students, utilize the Graduate Plus loan program from the federal government. We anticipate a greater shift towards private borrowing, requiring a credit-worthy co-signer for these students. When looking specifically at our professional students, these percentages increase. From the medical school, 34% and 51% at our Duluth campus. For pharmacy, 36% and 47% at our Duluth campus. For nursing, that is 27%. For law, that is 41%. That is dentistry, that is 48%. And for veterinary medicine, that is 34%. Regarding the loan proration based on less than full-time enrollment, Approximately 5% of undergraduate degree-seeking students system-wide, and this is 22% at our Crookston campus, would be subject to loan proration due to less than full-time enrollment levels, ranging from 6 to 11 credits. Graduate and professional students will also be impacted. Approximately 9.5% of graduate students, that's 242 unique students, mainly on our Twin Cities campus, system-wide will be impacted, and 0.7% of our professional students system-wide. Thank you all again for the opportunity to testify today, and I welcome your questions.
Mr. Shepard, if you would introduce yourself and present your testimony.
Sure. Chair Port and members of the committee, my name is Dr. Paul Shepard, and I have the honor to serve as the Associate Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs and Enrollment Management at the Minnesota State System. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you issues that Minnesota State has been navigating at the federal level. Minnesota State represents 26 state colleges and 7 universities located in 47 communities across Minnesota. For context, we award over 34,000 degrees, certificates, and diplomas each year, and we offer 12,000 customized training, occupational, and professional classes. Minnesota State educates the workforce of Minnesota. Joining me in the audience today is Scott Goings, who serves as General Counsel for Minnesota State. Our General Counsel's office has been following the status of several litigation issues at the federal level, and Scott can respond to questions you might have in that space. The work we do has significant interaction with the federal government. If there is one word we would use to describe the place our students and campuses find themselves in, it is uncertainty. There is uncertainty surrounding grants at the federal funding. There's also uncertainty for students in the area of student loans and for our international students. I'm sure you're aware of the grant cancellations that have taken place over the past 9 months. We are tracking cancellation of 9 grants that total $9.9 million at 8 of our institutions. While the extent of grant cancellations at Minnesota State does not reach the levels of large research universities, there is real impact. These campuses need to deal with the fallout of financial uncertainty. During the lead up to the passage of the reconciliation bill this past summer, we voiced our opposition to a provision that thankfully did not pass, referred to as risk sharing. If this provision in the bill had passed, it would have potentially placed significant financial pressure on our institutions. Institutions would have had to have been responsible for covering student loan repayments for students that defaulted. I would also like to highlight TRIO programs. These federally funded programs provide academic tutoring, financial guidance, college preparation, and other support services to help low-income students, first-generation college students, and individuals with disabilities achieve their educational goals. I'm excited to know you'll hear from students who participate in TRIO programs during this hearing. Minnesota State has a total of 59 TRIO programs on 24 campuses across the system. That number represents 70% of TRIO programs at colleges and universities in Minnesota. Across Minnesota State, 11,641 students benefit from TRIO programs. That number represents 77% of students engaged in TRIO programs in Minnesota. Minnesota State colleges and universities have been awarded over $20 million in federal TRIO grants. This number represents 69% of TRIO grant funding awarded in Minnesota. Funding for TRIO was eliminated in the President's budget proposal, which caused great concern and uncertainty for our campuses from a financial and student support perspective. We are pleased that there seems to be bipartisan support in Congress, but uncertainty of this funding has been very difficult for our campuses and our students. I'd like to briefly mention student loans. Many of our former students took out student loans to be able to finish their degree. And over the past few years, there have been a great deal of debate on pausing and forgiving student loan debt. No matter what your position is on this issue, I think we can all agree that these borrowers have had to navigate through political discussion without any clarity. We need to reduce uncertainty for our students and our former students. Most of the interactions that Minnesota State has with the federal government relates to our student loans and grants. For an open access system, these programs are a lifeline for our students and allows them to pursue a degree. This ultimately gives the state of Minnesota the workforce it needs to thrive. Over 56,000 students attending a Minnesota State college or university are Pell Grant eligible. Many of our students come to our classrooms with food insecurity, housing insecurity, mental health concerns, and other basic needs challenges, all of which are very real issues that impact student learning. With the legislature's help, we have been a leader in addressing these challenges. A couple of examples I'd like to share include a system-wide emergency grant program that has already provided students with approximately $5 million to address unexpected financial emergencies that often cause students to leave college before graduation. We were also able to launch a supplemental student support program that provides all students at all colleges and universities with access to mental health and basic needs resources 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. Before I close, I'd like to also say a few words about our international students. The proposed federal rule replacing duration of status with fixed date admissions creates significant uncertainty for international students by imposing rigid timelines that often do not align with the actual time needed to complete a degree. Students and institutions would face costly and time-consuming extension processes and increased compliance costs that could delay and disrupt academic progress. This uncertainty could deter prospective students from choosing U.S. institutions, undermining our ability to attract and retain global talent. Minnesota State faculty and staff collaborated on a public comment submitted during the federal rulemaking process expressing these concerns. Chair Port and members of the committee, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to testify today. As you've heard, Minnesota State's partnership with the federal government is critical in order to serve our students. When this partnership is functioning well, everyone benefits, including Minnesota's workforce. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shepard. Senator McQuaid.
Thank you. And I want to go fast because I definitely want to make sure we have time for the students. And I think it would bear full disclosure that Mr. Peterson, which I've never called you in your entire life, and I went to college together. And I would love those numbers if you could get those to me. That was staggering to hear, and I appreciate that you had them right after I asked that question. I have two questions. The first one is, can you repeat, this is actually, I think, for you, Dr. Shepard, the percentage of students at Crookston on loan proration? It was like 5% overall, but the Crookston number was really high. Can you repeat that for me?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator. So regarding the loan proration on less than full-time enrollment, so approximately 5% of our undergraduate degree-seeking students system-wide. However, at our Crookston campus, that is 22%.
Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, that one, oof, that one really got me. And yes, it was for you, Mr. Peterson. And then I guess my other question is, so, you know, clearly these students need to borrow to go to school, and I kept hearing like, and they'll turn to private borrowers. Who are these private borrowers? Who runs these companies? How much money do they make? Who are they?
Mr. Peterson, Mr. Shepard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator. So these are private companies that we refer students to. It's at the student's discretion on who they are working directly with. These could be banks. These could be the state of Minnesota has a loan. So there are a wide variety of borrowing types and of lenders. And it is at the student's discretion on who they are working with.
Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And if I was going to go to a bank, I bank with, I don't even know who I bank with anymore. It doesn't matter. Let's say I go to Wells Fargo. What would my student loan, what's the percent of interest that I'd be paying on that? What's the APR there?
Mr. Shepard or Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Senator. That would be at the discretion of the bank, so it will vary widely.
Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could you give me top, bottom? What is the bracket we'd be working with?
Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Senator. I don't have that information with me. We can work with our government relations to give you a ballpark estimate.
Thank you.
Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I might ask the students when they come up, what's theirs. So just be warned, you don't have to answer the question, students, when you come up, but I'm going to ask.
Thank you both very much for your testimony. We appreciate that. And Mr. Peterson, if you could share those numbers with any of the staff that was connected with you, we'll get them out to all the senators.
Thank you. We will do so.
Thank you very much. Finally, and maybe most importantly, we will hear from some students, Michaela Holman-Schmidt and Taylor Olson. If you can come up to the testifiers table, and then we will also have M. Hodge joining on Zoom, but we will start with Michaela Holman-Schmidt. If you would introduce yourself for the record and please present your testimony.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Michaela Holman-Schmidt. I work at Dakota County Technical College and Inver Hills Community College and am a TRIO alum, which is what I will speak to today. I'm a first-generation low-income student who had the privilege of being in TRIO programs from high school through multiple college graduations. I was really unaware of what my future would hold, and the support I found in these programs would put me on the pathway to my career in higher education. While in TRIO Upward Bound at Burnsville High School, I had the opportunity to tour many colleges, receive ACT test prep, learn study skills, and develop leadership skills that would help me continue into post-secondary learning. While in TRIO Student Support Services in college, I was able to expand on my leadership skills and continue helping other students along their education journey as well as my own. As a first-gen student, I found navigating college really difficult. I started at a university where I would later drop out after my halfway through my sophomore year. I then had to take a year off to kind of figure out what I wanted to do because university just wasn't fitting at that time. Since my mom was in the accounting field, I decided to go to school for an accounting diploma, which I did receive in 2019. In 2021, I decided that I wanted to go back to school because I didn't want to work in accounting. I just followed kind of what my mom did. So I decided to finish my degree through Dakota County Technical College. During those years, my family went through many hardships. If TRIO hadn't taught me how to ask for help, navigating college resources, being able to access emergency grants, I would have dropped out of school. In 2023, I reached another milestone of obtaining my bachelor's degree in individualized studies through Metropolitan State University. I have the TRIO programs to thank for the motivation and the support through my various academic journeys. In 2019, while I was finishing my diploma, I was an upward bound tutor at Burnsville High School and was able to see how firsthand how the relationships of students and staff really help develop students' confidence and skills in and outside of the classroom. The same year, I accepted an opportunity to be a TRIO administrative assistant through Dakota County Technical College, where I helped both support the Upward Bound High School grants and the Student Support Services College grant. Being able to experience these programs through multiple lenses have been influential and inspiring. These experiences gave me the academic and personal support I needed to thrive, and they inspired me to dedicate my career to helping other first-gen and underrepresented students reach their goals. Since 2019, I have worked at Dakota County Technical College, and I became a shared employee at Inver Hills Community College in 2024. While I no longer work directly with the TRIO programs, I still feel their presence on campus and just how much they positively affect our student populations. With the help of TRIO, I have found my passion of higher ed and helping create a more accessible and friendly process for students in my current role. If TRIO programs go away, barriers that were once broken will go back up again for those wanting higher education opportunities and who may not have the means to do so. Equal opportunity and access to education is essential to this nation's future workforce and for the personal self-development of each individual. TRIO has helped shape my life in many ways, and my wish is for that impact to continue onto the future generations of our communities. My life without the TRIO programs would look very different. I believe I would have struggled through applying to school and figuring out which college was the best fit. I also believe my leadership skills and experience would not be where they are at today. I wouldn't have made so many meaningful connections and would not have found my passion in higher ed if it hadn't been for TRIO Upward Bound. And then I also would not have had the confidence to apply for graduate school, which I plan to start in fall of 2026. I appreciate your time and thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Ms. Holman-Schmidt. We'll do testimony from all three of you and then have questions, but want to give a shout out to Upward Bound in Burnsville. It's my district and it's an incredible program, so thank you for your work there. Ms. Olson, if you would introduce yourself for the record and present your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Taylor Olson, and I am a current student at Inver Hills Community College. first-time college student. And as a former minimum wage bartender of 7 years with a bank account that was just as empty as my own cup for life, I signed up for college. A generation college student attending college for the first generation college student attending college for the first time. In my 30s, it's been a pretty terrifying and exciting journey. The first 2 years were particularly difficult for me as I was mostly studying online and had no idea what kind of resources could be available to me. Fast forward to the last year and a half, along with my decision to attend full-time, I landed here with TRIO, and it only took one afternoon classroom visit from a few staff members to start asking about what TRIO is. So with that visit, it unpacked an entirely different and more accessible campus experience for me. TRIO has provided the flashlight that I needed to navigate. The day I decided to work on campus for TRIO through my work-study program, the TRIO department was the day that everything else made sense. So what TRIO has done for me personally is that it reminded me that I am smart and that I do belong here and that there are multiple ways to achieve success. It was here at TRIO that I learned that I wanted to do social work, something that I had continued with what I thought was my path. I never would have realized this if I hadn't gone through the TRIO program, that my real path was social work. It's the hands-on advising from my amazing advisor, Jen, who no matter how busy she is, and she's been very busy lately due to the issues, she's always able to provide the most personal guidance I have ever received. All these things they all seem so small and simple, but when you add them up together, it's huge. It's a way for someone like me who once thought she wasn't smart enough for college to get over that barrier and to make wonderful connections with people who want to support you along the way. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. And if we can turn to Zoom now, M. Hodge, please unmute yourself, introduce yourself for the record, and present your testimony.
Amazing. Good afternoon, chairs and members of the committee. My name is M. Hodge, and I'm a student at Minnesota State University, Mankato. I'm also the elected state chair of Students United, representing the 55,000 students at the public Min State universities. And I also wanted to say thank you for the opportunity for me to share how recent federal changes to student loans and how the Department of Education policies are affecting students like me. So I'm currently a Master's of Social Work student who also did my undergrad in social work at Mankato State. And when I tell people my career path, I'm often hit with the question of why I would enter a career with typically low pay. And this is a reality of my chosen profession. However, I did not enter this career path for money, but to serve communities in need. The average social worker with an undergrad degree can expect to make around $40,000 to $55,000, while a master's could result in $60,000 to $75,000 depending on licensure choice. Therefore, after I graduated, I took the risk to jump right into my master's to ensure I could make a livable salary. Now, these trade-offs are realities that I was aware of when I started my education. However, over the last year, the federal student aid landscape has shifted dramatically. Many students entered college expecting one set of repayment options and now find ourselves navigating a maze of new programs and rules. While the Biden administration's repayment options like the SAVE plan promised lower monthly payments and more forgiveness for low-income borrowers, this will now expire in 2026. Students are unsure which new plans they will qualify for, how to enroll, or whether the rules might change before we graduate. And the results brings anxiety, not just about paying loans, but about whether the system itself can be trusted to keep its promises, especially considering the major reductions at the Department of Education. These changes, combined with the ending of Grad Plus loans, have me worried about pushing students into a less regulated private market. Without access to federal borrowing that once covered the full cost of graduate education students, especially those pursuing degrees in social work, education, and public health, may have to rely on private lenders with high interest rates, meaning fewer income-based repayment options and limited deferment protections. For Minnesota's regional universities and professional programs, this could mean fewer applicants and a growing gap between who can and cannot afford a post-secondary education, undermining the state's long-term workforce goals. Perhaps most relevant to me is the negotiated rulemaking in the Department of Education, which has signaled changes to the Public Service Loan Forgiveness, otherwise known as the PSLF program. The definition of a qualifying employer under PSLF may narrow, and some organizations that currently count may become ineligible if the Department of Education determines they have a substantial illegal purpose. And the department has also lowered the burden of proof for these claims. I share the concerns with the experts who fear a political litmus test for loan forgiveness. These federal changes are shaping the financial and emotional reality of today's college students. Students want to invest in their education, but with the unpredictability of federal policy, it makes it difficult to plan for our futures and continue in education. Behind every policy debate are students balancing jobs, family responsibilities, and the hope that higher education will lead to stability and purpose. We deserve a system that is stable, transparent, and fair. One that allows us to pursue service-oriented careers without the fear of lifelong debt. And our ability to contribute to our communities depends on a higher education system we can count on. With that, thank you for listening and for your commitment to Minnesota students, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much to all three of you. I will go to Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to all three of you for stepping forward, sharing your stories, and for your courage in speaking out and speaking truth to power. I just have a general question. Any one of the three or all three of you can answer. What is the, just in your daily life, in connection and in contact and community with your peers, what is the mood? What is the nature of the conversation? What are you talking about? How are you feeling?
Go ahead, any of you.
I can go. It's been heavy. It's been really heavy. I feel like a lot of people are on edge. Oh, did it work? Okay, thank you. I'm like, first time doing this. Yeah, it's been very heavy and very on edge. I feel a little tension. I feel worry about myself, knowing I don't really know what my future is right now. I know that I want to graduate and that I'm going to go through, but yeah.
I can speak. I think, especially as a staff member at two-year institutions, I would echo what Taylor said. It is very heavy because the funding and the staff shortages, how can we best serve the students when we're all very, just spread very thin? But then also concerned about, we have home life to worry about, but then we also worry about our students, wanting to make sure that they are successful and how can we help them. I think there's always that personal kind of heavy feeling that you want to help fix everyone's problems while trying to maintain your own. So there's, the heaviness and trying to really balance all of it.
Senator Dibble.
I can also...
Oh, go ahead, Em.
So sorry. I can also answer the question. Thank you, Senator, for that question. Through talking to a lot of my classmates, I can echo the same sentiment of those students there in person. There's a lot of fear and uncertainty about the lack of funding and a lot of things cut. For example, I am friends with an international student, and he, with everything going on, had to change all of his plans. He wanted to go to the workforce immediately right after graduating with his undergrad, but had to make that decision to pursue his master's degree. Otherwise, there were so many more complications. And I know a lot of my classmates, too, were like banking on going into our master's just so we could make a better income and live more sustainably. And those are kind of the hard choices we had to make, like from jumping right into our undergrad, right into our master's. So thank you for that question.
Thank you. I think Nikki Oliver might have a question or have an answer to Senator McQuaid's interest rate question. Or Dr. Robinson, great. If you would just join us and answer Senator McQuaid's question for us.
Thank you. So to respond to the question regarding the interest rates on the private student loans, I do have some information for you, and I want to give just a couple pieces of context first. One is that one of the challenges with private student loans is that a student may not know until they've completed their loan application what interest rate they're going to get versus looking at a federal loan where it's really spelled out for you up front. For private student loans, there are a number of factors that will determine that interest rate, whether the student is getting a fixed rate, whether they're getting a variable rate, what term, how many years their loan is taken out for, what their credit score is, information that most people probably don't have at the start of that process. What we see is that for many of the private loan lenders, their maximum sort of stated interest rate is somewhere around 17 to 18%. I do know that there are some borrowers that we are aware of in Minnesota who are upwards of 20%, including one borrower that we're aware of that was at 25%. So that is an outlier. That's not where most folks are, but generally folks who are in the student loan, private student loan, and are doing, a kind of more standard borrowing are probably going to be in a double digits interest rate category. And I also want to note that, I know Senator Mann is no longer with us. She mentioned that this is going to bankrupt students. The reality is that these loans are usually not able to be discharged in bankruptcy either. And so this is something that's really important for folks to keep in mind as well, is that once they enter into these loans and this borrowing, it's not something, even if they face real economic hardship, they're not going to be able to, in most circumstances, discharge that in a bankruptcy setting. If you think about a student who is in that graduate and professional program, who's maybe needing to borrow, say, $100,000 in the private loan marketplace, in their borrowing sort of under the standard terms and at the within that limit of that's stated, they're going to be looking at loan payments of somewhere between $1,400 and $2,200 per month for 20 years. And so, I think it's really a long-term and a generational impact to have that kind of debt, because that is, that's rent, that is a house payment, that is a pretty, even though, we know that these are folks who are going into oftentimes higher wage, higher earning fields, that's still a pretty significant debt burden to carry on, to begin their professional career with.
Senator Dibble, I'll come back to you.
I don't even know how to respond to that. I do have one quick follow-up question. I understand that the for-profit institutions have an interest in shoving students out of the public loan system and making their own loans to students. Are those rates similar at in those settings?
Dr. Robinson?
Thank you for that question. Not having looked at their rate program specifically, I would assume that they would likely be more comparable to that, because that would be the sort of marketplace that they're entering into. But I don't have, I haven't checked that yet.
Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So basically, our president is basically shoving students, as Senator Mann said, punishing those who want to achieve a higher education, and shoving them out of the public loan system to forcing them into private lending, if they can even qualify for it, at credit card rates. So they might as well take out their Visa or their MasterCard and use revolving loan credit.
At least you get points then.
Yeah, they can
There
fly.
are no airline miles for student loan payments.
Thank you. So Madam Chair, if I could just make some concluding comments. So, Madam Chair, Minnesota's prosperity has never been an accident. It is the direct result of intentional public investment in research, in higher education, in science, and in the innovation ecosystems that have powered our state for generations, from the University of Minnesota to Mayo Clinic, to our Minnesota State campuses, private colleges, and trade institutions across the region. These are the heart of a diversified economy that supports thousands of good jobs. And, Madam Chair, I think we've established without a doubt that entire engine in Minnesota is under attack. The Trump administration's decision to terminate scores of federal research grants from the NIH, the NSF, and others, NASA, hits Minnesota directly in the places where our economic strength is deepest and where the returns on investment are greatest. And it's not just an attack on science, it's an attack on workers, industry, and long-term economic security, and as we've also established, Madam Chair, our democracy. Federal grants are the backbone of the research that fuels our state's most important sectors: healthcare, medical technology, agriculture, clean energy, advanced manufacturing, computing, and biotechnology. Let us not forget about taconite, which was created through research at the university, and so much that happens in our value-added food sector as well. The University of Minnesota alone generates more than $11.5 billion in statewide economic activity each year. Its research supports more than 25,000 jobs. Its discoveries launch new companies. Last year, a record number of startups, as I mentioned earlier, came directly out of our university's research labs. Mayo Clinic's research enterprise anchors the world-leading Medical Alley cluster and drives thousands of high-paying jobs from Rochester to the Twin Cities. Terminating those grants means clinical trials shutting down midstream, as Dr. Mann said, labs laying off staff, graduate students losing funding, promising treatments for pediatric brain cancer. Thank you, Senator McQuaid. Alzheimer's, chronic diseases stalled or abandoned. The pediatric brain cancer grant that was abruptly canceled is not as an abstraction as Senator McQuaid so aptly cited from the article. The harm does not stop at the lab door. When federal grants are eliminated, the immediate consequence is job loss in high-skill, high-wage jobs that cannot be replaced overnight, but the broader consequence is the erosion of entire industry clusters. Those that I mentioned earlier, they all depend on the discoveries made, the talent trained in our research institutions. Minnesota has more Fortune 500 companies per capita than almost any state in the country, and those companies and the hundreds of suppliers and small businesses that support them depend on the stability, the strength of our research ecosystem. When Washington attacks that system, it threatens our entire headquarters economy. That's what it's called. We have a headquarters economy. The tax base that funds our schools and roads and the opportunities available to working families in every corner of Minnesota. So let's be clear. These grant cancellations are not about fiscal prudence. They are about ideology. They are about punishing institutions of higher learning, places of free inquiry, scientific rigor, and independent thought. And in so doing, this administration is undermining the very wellspring of Minnesota and American prosperity. A report we received lays it out plainly. When a country turns against its researchers, it voluntarily surrenders its economic leadership. And as we heard in the second part of our testimony, when it turns on those who aspire to public service, it is surrendering its economic leadership. As state lawmakers, we cannot replace those billions of federal dollars being stripped away, but we can call this what it is: reckless, destabilizing, and an assault on Minnesota's economic future. And we should not mince words. The Trump administration is choosing to weaken our health system and damage our universities, kneecap our homegrown industries, and jeopardize the future of workers and communities who depend on a strong research-driven economy. This economy has been built over generations. It should not be dismantled in 1 year or 2 years by short-sighted federal actions that serve no public purpose. Thank you, Madam Chair. I look forward to continuing to work with this committee, with our entire legislature, with our friends who are not in this room today, who should be, and I'm not surprised they're hiding from this testimony and this hearing today, to fight for the restoration of these essential federal investments in Minnesota's people, industries, and economic vitality.
Thank you, Senator Dibble. Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I really want to thank the students for coming and sharing your experience and your testimony with us. And Senator Dibble, you did such a great job talking about the impact, but I want to talk about what this picture paints for us. About 50 years ago, roughly, with many notable exceptions prior to that, but about 50 years ago, at the same time is right around when women broadly started going to college, when low-income people had access to college, and when people of color had access to college. Before that, college was not for any of those people. It was for white, wealthy men to go and perseverate and dream and think of ways to keep stealing money from poor people. And what we are seeing today is the attempt to reinstitute the racial and gender hierarchy in society to treat us as second-class citizens legally through the destruction of higher education. There is a reason why a program like TRIO, for example, which is wraparound, right? It starts early. It's not just financial aid. It's support student services and counseling and helping people navigate going to college, being in college. College is a culture that if your parents didn't go, it's inexplicable. It's so hard to understand, and the entire experience is a little rattling. And my wife was a first generation college student, and it was confusing, right? And so if you don't have that passed down to you, which most of us don't, because it's been about 50 years where more than just white wealthy men could go to college broadly, and this is an attempt to say, oh, we looked around, we saw that there's people we don't like going to college, we see that people we don't like are doing research who are helping people we don't like, we don't want them to live longer. They want to control what we teach, who they teach, who has opportunity, who has their problems solved. They just started doing research on tampons and pads with not water this year in 2025, for example. They want to stop teaching history so they can repeat it. That is what's happening. And so we are killing opportunities so we can keep people so oppressed they can't do anything more than go to a job that they get paid less so billionaires can make more. They're shoved into private loans. I mean, it's like two-pronged, right? It's like enrich the wealthy, the uber wealthy, and discriminate against people and bring back a world that looked a lot more like 1925 than 2025. And I don't like it, and I'm not for it. And I want to thank the students in particular for sitting in front of us today, because you are the reminders of exactly who we want to lift up and succeed, who are brilliant and have so much to offer society and deserve to be at college. And just because there's like one guy who can't let go of the 70s and 80s and hates how the country has changed since then doesn't mean we get to go back. We're not going to. I really just am floored, because the fulcrum of this is about control and power and keeping us down. And it was really brought to mind, I think, like right at the end here when I was hearing the students all tell your stories, and then hearing 17 to 18% interest rate on loans. I don't even pay that on my house, and I bought it at a very inopportune time for mortgage interest rates. The feds can be about 8 to 10%. I mean, enriching the richest people to drive people into bankruptcy just so that they can learn and get ahead. And I also want to say that higher education is about more than just a job and a career. I learned when I was at St. Thomas about poetry, and I don't do anything with poetry here, but it was worth knowing about because it's a beautiful part of how we tell stories and communicate with each other. And that's but one example. I also don't do geology, and I really enjoyed my geology courses. It's about having knowledge for knowledge purpose, for building a better world where we can see each other for the full humans that we are, and we can put all of our brains to solving the biggest problems that we have. Talent is distributed equally, but opportunity is not. And the closer we have gotten to distributing equal opportunity, we see it trying to be ripped away. It's deeply disturbing, quite frankly. But every time we have these hearings and these professionals come before us and they talk about the people they work with, they talk about the work they do, the work they want to do, I have more hope than ever, because there's more of us that want our country to succeed than want to take it back. Take it backwards, I should say. So I'm just heartbroken at all of the stuff that we've heard today. I end the hearings feeling that way, because you learn all this information as a state legislator that we didn't previously have to know, because the federal government was supposed to be a partner, was supposed to do their job. We were going to continue to fight alongside you. We believe in the inherent value, dignity, and worth of you as students, you as institutions, the students you serve, the research you do, the problems you're trying to solve, the beautiful world you're looking to protect or create. It is worth fighting alongside you to continue to do that. So thank you all for coming. Thank you for being here. And we have a lot of work ahead of us, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator McQuaid. I want to thank you all for coming today, for your testimony, and members for your thoughtful questions and comments. I will say today felt the most absurd to me. no matter what your ideology, like, unless you only want control, education is the path. Sometimes it feels like this committee is like a train ride through horrors, where like every 2 weeks we get a new subject of something terrible that's happening to our state. And for whatever reason, this one really just broke through that it has no purpose other than harming people and control. And when we were in Duluth a week ago meeting with students and faculty, someone made the point that students in college don't just learn new facts, they learn what it is to become citizens and adults and members of a society who work together. The people that we heard from today are here on behalf of the next generation of teachers, nurses, scientists, maybe even legislators. And the research grants that the federal government is cutting will cost jobs in the short term, and the loss of those discoveries will cost lives. The cuts to tuition support and student services will make college unaffordable and unworkable for many Minnesotans, especially those who would be the first in their family to pursue higher education, as many of you were. Our campuses, our local economies, and our families will all pay the price. Someone else last week in Duluth said that research tells us that there are only 2 ways to change the economic fortune for a family for generations. One is winning the lottery. The other is higher education. Investing in our students is the closest we can come to printing lottery tickets. And Minnesota has done that. We have made higher education a priority in our state. We've made it one of the places people think of when they think of higher education. And we've worked to open that opportunity for all Minnesotans. We will continue here, us around this table, we will continue to do that for years to come. I know you all will too. I look forward to the day when we have a federal government who will be our partner in that again. And I do want to say, I hope that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are hearing you today, because I think this has been really critical, important testimony. And we will send the link to today's hearing out to all of our members, along with the 35 pieces of really disturbing material that like spells all of this stuff out. Because these are attacks on all Minnesotans. And I hope we can all fight together for our state. Thank you so much for being here today. We are adjourned.